Good afternoon, everybody. This is John Ellis, and today is the Friday edition of SEOWiSE. And we have a special guest with us today, Gideon Rosenblatt from the Vital Edge. We will be interviewing him, talking about technology and humanness and tension, something Alex and I know about very well from the last several weeks of our SEOWiSE lives. But first, let's start with the sponsors. As always, this show is brought to you by Google, because without their array of free services that we give our input into, we would not be able to do any of this. Also, Wirecast, an amazingly complex piece of software that works for the most part all the time. Still love it. It's technology, it's cutting edge, and it allows us to take hangouts and make them do these kind of things. And also, Todd LeBeau, who is the first SEOWiSE patron. This guy, I used to call an angel investor and realize it's just an angel. I don't even believe in angels, but he's been an amazing, incredible human being for us, helped us out in so many ways, did these new graphics for us, helped me with technology, hasn't asked for anything in return. I keep asking him, what can I do for you? So, Todd, you're our first real patron. Thank you. That's really cool. Gideon Rosenblatt is the CEO and chief writer for the Vital Edge. The Vital Edge is Gideon, and we're going to talk about that in the interview. But first, I'd like to read you a little bit about who he is. Gideon Rosenblatt is the publisher and main writer for the Vital Edge. He has a background in technology, business, social enterprise, and social change. All things that Alex and I are very interested in. Between 2001 and early 2010, Gideon was the executive director of Groundwire, a mission-based, not-for-profit technology and strategy consulting firm dedicated to building a sustainable society. Also something very cool. Over that time, he led Groundwire's transformation into a nationally recognized leader in citizen engagement. Everything this guy does is pretty damn cool. So I'd like to introduce to you Gideon and Alex. Hey everybody, we're live.
Hi.
Hi guys.
Hey, hi everybody.
So I tried to do you justice because really
That's about the best intro anybody's ever done. Thank you.
Really? Thank you. Well,
That's
okay.
pretty nice. That's pretty nice, I have to say. Thanks.
You impressed me. Is that what? I'm sorry?
It makes me sound a lot cooler than I actually am.
I'm only gonna, isn't that what TV's supposed to do?
Yes.
So, Alex, you got a chance to take a look at Gideon's site over the last few days, right?
Yeah, and I feel awful, but I just got the opportunity to read his most recent article, and it's an interesting new direction that you're taking, Gideon. I like it. I love it. There's a couple of things in communication that we talk about that it really addresses specifically, but I like that the entire article just brings up a ton of questions. I love that. Like, it ended with like 6 questions. I was like, perfect. That's what writing should do.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So that conversation, what was the title of that blog post, Gideon? Because it was
Well, it's called Our Organization's Alive, and it's the title is even a question, and I basically am coming to this point where what I'm realizing is that there's some things I do know, and then there's a bunch of stuff as I start looking out to the future that I just don't know, and so instead of writing a book, I actually am using my website to ask these questions. And oh my God, you should see. You did actually, John. You saw some of the commentary that was on my Google Plus page. I mean, the input I'm getting from people, the feedback is just, it's amazing actually. When you ask a question and you really are asking, it's the conversation you get is incredible.
Yeah, I was blown away. As I told you earlier in the green room, it's like, look, I'm not dumb. These conversations are, but they're high level. I can follow them, but sometimes I gotta sit and reread somebody's response. Go, holy crap! I mean, talk about opening 4 new rabbit holes. We haven't even finished discussing rabbit hole 1.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I guess in the bigger picture, I never experienced conversations like this on Facebook or any other web space. So It's a beautiful thing, and I really, really appreciate your contribution to the web space.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, it's amazing. I can kind of tell when I end up with a whole bunch of tabs, new tabs open on my browser as a result of like hearing from people. That means I'm having to dig into a whole bunch of stuff I just never heard of, or am having to kind of reacquaint myself with. And that was happening all the time. I ended up with like probably 30 tabs. My browser almost crashed. It just got so slow. So that's a sign. That's a sign of something.
It is. Half the people I got to go back and like making notes. Say something to this person. Respond to that. Right?
Yeah.
So let's move into the actual first question, which is, I love your site and everything the Vital Edge is about. That said, right, and you just hinted about book. So that being said, most of everybody on the web is here trying to do something to put some food on the table. So I'm reading looking at your website. I understand what it is. I get what you do. I think it's great. Is this an endeavor for you to just be a connector, a hub to help others, or is it something that puts food on the table for you, or do you plan on doing that with it? What is the Vital Edge?
Yeah. So I would describe this as purely a labor of love. But that's it. I'm not trying to earn any revenue off of it. The funny thing about it was that this is my second blog. I still have another one that's called Alchemy of Change. That was where I first was experimenting with my writing and things like that, and that felt a lot more like a blog. When I did this one, the Vital Edge, I think that it was kind of my inherent perfectionist tendencies kind of came out, and so I built this thing that I wish now kind of looked a little bit more like a blog. When you look at the site now, it looks like it's kind of like a company. And so people keep asking me, well, what's the business model? And I say, it's a blog, So it is a blog, and it really is my way of exploring these ideas. Like I said earlier, this may end up as a book, but for right now, I'm using the digital medium as a way to converse with people about these ideas, really about the future.
That's Alex, I can see you smiling in either screen. So that's brilliant and leads perfectly into the next question, answers the next question, which is literally, are you a personal brand or a corporate brand? And I think you answered that. You're a personal brand right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even though it doesn't feel like it when you go to the site. And I think, that's some of the things that, and we were talking about this with the work that you do, is that the right thing? Should I be doing that? And actually, that's one of the things over the course of this year is like, well, maybe I need to bring myself back into this brand over time.
Oh wow, you couldn't have said that's an interesting way to say it. Bring myself back into the brand. That's exactly what it's very interesting. What you are doing is actually where you're supposed to start now. That's the. So I'm looking over at you over here, looking at you over here. But seriously, I'm trying. You are doing a message that I spend hours trying to teach others. And that is, start with you. I'm not going to care anything about your corporation till I give a shit about you. Right? And, here's me going, wow, I'm getting to know this person, Gideon, because I don't see any separation between the corporation and Gideon. Honestly, I'm not even sure what it is, but I love everything coming out of his head. Right? Yeah. So you've sold me on your company, and you don't even have one yet because you sold me on you. Right?
That's funny. Yeah, it's true. And the thing is that I'll tell you, my personal experience was in building that, which was right around this time last year was when I launched it, and we kind of, so I'll stop saying we. I fooled myself into thinking that people cared about this brand. Now the brand has a lot of meaning for me. Like it's vital. I can tell you what the brand means to me, but it's really, in a way, and I think this is true for a lot of blogs, it's more like a title to a book. Hey, this is what this book is about, and here's the author, right? And I think that's, I kind of went too far in the direction of it's a brand, and then when you do that, you bury you bury the personal. You bury that part of yourself, and so I'll be trying to fix that over this next year.
Very interesting. Very cool way to say it. It's because you are the same. That blend is like, well, how much of me do I put in? Well, how much corporate-y stuff do I put in? And where's that line between?
Yeah.
But what you're doing is, it's the next step. It's very interesting because we're teaching people. Let me back up. We're teaching people to undo their old ways. The old ways was, here's the corporation, the people inside of it we don't want to know about, we don't care about. We just the corporation and how it functions, right?
Yeah.
But we're reversing all of that now. We're demanding as the consumer, I want to know the people, because if I don't like your people, I'm not going to like you.
Yep.
Okay? And so you're basically saying, okay, here's me. Here's me expressing ideas as a brand, as a person, whatever. Here's the mix. Here's what I've cooked. Taste of it. If you dig it, great. Give me your feedback. If you toss it in the garbage can, let me adjust. Let me figure out what's going on. But the humanness, and here's where I'm going with this, because I actually have your entire description of what you wrote for the brand, and I'm going to read that because I love how you defined the Vital Edge. But in your quest to understand or to define that organism, the living organism of a corporation, we, the people, have forced that issue by saying, well, you better define it by humans because that's what we're asking for. Right? Your technology is great and lovely, but if we don't see humans first, screw your technology.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Actually, so here's kind of a far out there idea that I think has very practical implications for companies. So the idea is that just as we humans have, we have skin and we have, we wrap ourselves in clothes, right? But we have skin that separates us from the outside world, right? And if you go that kind of idea of there's an inside and an outside to an organism, that scales all the way down to like the cells that make us up. They have this thing called a membrane, right, that separates the outsides of the cell from the insides. And
right.
I think that organizations have the same thing. They have this kind of barrier that separates what's on the inside from what's on the outside. But the problem is in the past, they tried to make that impenetrable, like a real, and they maybe use their organizational charts or whatever, or firewalls to kind of block that off. But I think that what you just said, John, is exactly right. That membrane for the organization is people. That's the first point of contact that we have when we try to get into the organization, when we try to get into a company. And if what we see when we first make contact is a bunch of software or a bunch of process or a bunch of gobbledygook that we don't, that feels alien, we're not going to do it. I really do believe that. And I think that's where I'm going with some of the future articles I'm going to be writing about, on the Vital Edge. But it's a key insight. And I think you just nailed it in a very practical sense, right?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That's my goal, is to try to distill some of this higher thinking down to a more pragmatic view for the small business owner, for the for the guy shopping at Safeway, right? What is my relationship at Safeway? I don't give a shit about the brand of Safeway, but the people that I talk to in the check stand, I love.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And Holly and all the, I know the manager of my Safeway. Her name's Holly because she's a human being and she's the reason I go back to Safeway.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's
so true. And we're so sick of these scripts. What is a script? It's a programming of a person, right? So when you're doing, when you get those telesales calls, or you're trying to get support, you're trying to like rearrange your flight, that you've got bumped on a flight, or you need to get back home sooner than you thought for some emergency, right? And you are basically interacting with a script being read by somebody. Like that's the ultimate turnoff, right? And so figuring out how companies can actually, that first layer of experience, have that be human. I think that's the essence of this.
It is. Well, and Alex, please take this in whatever direction you want to go in terms of communication, person wearing the technology on her forehead. Right? So,
Yeah, it's not even the I mean, this is a question as someone that on my personal page it says that I'm a brand strategist, whatever that means. We just kind of came up with that title, right, John? Um, but
yeah, let's not
as
diminish it or
someone,
anything.
well, as someone who is the voice of a brand, this is a question that I get a lot. Bobby Joe Woods brought me into a conversation just a few days ago because someone was asking. They're an author, and they were asking, should I have my personal page and then also have a brand page? Should I separate myself like this? And for someone that is a personal brand, that's a difficult decision to make because it's more time and it's spreading yourself in different directions. But, how do you separate yourself from your personal brand? Because there are certain things that are going to be brand versus just, like you and the stuff that you like. So it is a question that I deal a lot with. And we do have a comment from Jeff Bond, more like a question. And again, this is a question that I get a lot, but I would like Gideon to try it out. How do you mix and intelligently balance personal brand and corporate brand when you are both? I found it limiting when I focused on the personal brand. How do you effectively scale to a corporate brand when your personal brand is holding you back, in parentheses, emotionally and logically? So how do you balance the personal with the corporate?
Yeah, I mean, I've struggled with it, but not probably in the same way as what we've just been talking about. I mean, for me, I don't really have a corporate. It's me right now. But I can go back to when I was running an organization and when I would write things for that organization. Actually, and that's not even that useful because that was before the social web was up. I mean, I guess what it comes down to for me in terms of social media is, and this is a very pragmatic thing, but you're sharing lots of ideas online, right? You're sharing, professional stuff, but one thing we know is that when you share just too much dry professional stuff, people get bored. And so every once in a while, when you throw in that fun picture or whatever like that, those are the things that get all of these likes or pluses or whatever it is, right? So what I found is, for me, trying to have a coherent set of topics that I talk about online, and then even within the humor and things like that I share, there's still kind of a ongoing theme that's really just like about humanity, or about, it's more uplifting. It's never like I don't really share stuff that's cynical. I don't, cynicism kind of turns me off. So even in the stuff that that's just purely fun and stuff like that, there's still kind of an overarching feeling, I guess is the way I would describe it. I don't know. Does that make sense?
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
That was fantastic.
absolutely. Anytime I give someone some sort of branding advice, the way that I approach the voice of a brand is I say that there's a piece of me in that brand. Like, there's a piece of me in SEOWiSE, and I found the piece of me that fits SEOWiSE, and it just like explodes as the voice of SEOWiSE. My personal page, I still share stuff that's relevant to what I do, but I love my dogs, so I share a lot of stuff about my dogs, and I love South Park, so I share a lot of stuff about South Park. But when I'm SEOWiSE, there's still a component of me that's in that. It's just so much more focused on that than the entirety of who I am. A more corporate, I guess, corporation that does this is the HuffPost. You always know who's posting especially when it's Matt Rappaport. You always know when it's even though he does the hashtag, it's him just because of the humor that he has, and because we all know him as him, and then we can see it in the HuffPost. So that's always been my take on it. John, you want to add anything?
Well, you guys, I don't know, this all seems very reminiscent of that whole 80-20 concept and things that we've seen tossed around by many other people. Martin Shervington, Ronnie, everybody says this blend, and it's here's what it is. I love the fact, Gideon, that you mentioned that you can always, no matter what you're talking about, it could be a cat or bacon, but you can always bring it back around or somehow ingest insert your theme, right? Whatever it happens to be. So, I could to give a good example, I could push out a post, and I do this all the time. Margaret Markison is a Protestant who writes a lot about religious stuff, but she's walking this line between religion and practical business. And so she'll send something, and I'll comment on it. I am an anti-theist, okay? But she is a client. We work together, and what I say is, you and I 50 years ago would be arguing about this crap. Today, I'm going to show you how I can weave my own thoughts into it, not go down a religious view, tack on my own interests, reshare it, and it's still good information, because if you take the religious aspect out of it, all you're doing is delivering practical information.
Yeah.
Right?
Can I read something to you that I just thought was I came across this just as a random comment that I saw on Google Plus, but I just have to read this because it's so relevant to this. So this is from, and I don't even know how you say it, Sauber F1 team. So this is the the Formula One racing guys, and this is some social media manager there who said this. I don't even know who this is, but he says, Gideon, SM social media managers represent a brand which doesn't have a true heart and soul. They depend on corporate principles and guidelines, and it is very difficult for them to bring their own personality in. People often ask, what do you think, Sober One F1 team? Or what's your opinion, team? Well, the team doesn't think, nor does it have an opinion. It has a communications department that comes up with guidelines on what people within the team are supposed to say, which is needed and a good thing, and he goes on to talk about that. But I just thought, wow, this is so, it was so interesting to see this person who I don't even know talking about, that he faces this struggle all the time. There's things he wants to say. It maybe is a she. I have no idea who this person is, right?
Right.
There's things that he or she wants to say, and he's kind of constrained, and he has to kind of manage that. But this person does a great job because the personality comes through nonetheless. And so, it's an example of somebody who went out online and kind of started talking about the soul and how that fits within their presence online of their brand, and did it in a really engaging way that didn't seem to cross the line of what was inappropriate or anything like that for the brand, and made it, I thought, way more engaging, actually, way more interesting.
Absolutely, and that's you nailed the biggest issue we have with social space is that we are demanding a relationship with the human beings. The human beings that work in these corporations are demanding to be allowed to have their own voice in a relationship, right? I mean, think about all of these social media policies. Do you remember the first 10 years of Facebook and social media where it was every company needs a social media policy now, and every company needs to make sure that their employee can't do shit on their profile because, we certainly couldn't have them getting drunk and drunk booking and mentioning our brand, right? I mean, the companies went, holy crap, what is this thing? We certainly can't let our employees have a voice. Yeah. That's the last thing we want, so we'll create the social media manager, which will literally just be a modernized version of the PR department, right? Here, tell them this, feed them this crap, right? and then we came back and said, no, we'd like a two-way conversation, please. We would like to be able to speak with somebody, and I don't want it to be a logo. Tell me your name, logo. Right? And today we are seeing that is evolving. Because the social media managers are saying, this ain't working, and the consumer's saying, this ain't working, and brands are saying, what do we need to change? I don't want to change, I'm afraid to change, but you're telling me this is the only way to go, right? Yeah. And it is the only way to go. I mean, Alex, I had a conversation with a very, very dear to my heart client this morning. Yesterday, a huge blowout fight just about this, about the trust factor between the employee and the business representative in the social space, right? Businesses are going to have to trust. This leads right into transparency. Businesses, if they want to survive, are going to have to be transparent. They're going to have to be open. They're going to have to allow their employees the freedom to express the fact that they are employees. And yeah, there's going to be problems there, but we want humans. We want humans, and this is the only way to make it happen. Brands like Best Buy and Toyota, Keurig, Cadbury, Stone Temple Consulting, which isn't a small company. I mean, just because Stone Temple Consulting is floating around in Google Plus and we all know them, I mean, they deal with Fortune 50 companies, so they are a big corporation as far as, somebody who is engaging the human directly in a two-way conversation as a brand, right? And are you familiar, Gideon, with the tech efforts that Best Buy and Toyota did over the holidays with regard to customer engagement?
No.
So they used Hangouts, right? A Hangout on Air, and over Christmas, Best Buy, I love this one. They literally had an open Hangout on Air, and just a little bit of amazing tech. You can take a Hangout on Air page, the actual event, right? You can put it in AdWords as a landing page. When you click on that, it opens up that landing page as a modal window, and you're getting the Best Buy Hangout with a live individual that you can join in that conversation. And the guy says, hey, it's your last minute shopper. Apparently you need something. Tell me what we're looking for. Let's go find it in the store.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
Toyota did one where you were building your dream Toyota. And for people that don't understand what this does for branding, just go read a book, because the relationship, the loyalty that you build when you do something like that, doesn't matter if it was with 50 people, that's going to spread exponentially, and that brand loyalty is going to carry across generations. That's how powerful that kind of stuff is. Am I wrong, Gideon? Am I overblowing it here?
No, I think so. Here's let me twist this in a slightly different direction that builds on this, because I think this is something that I've been thinking about a little bit. I want to hear both of your takes on this. So let's play this out. There's some interesting. Actually, this is a very interesting book. The Second Machine Age is by Eric Bjorn. I don't know how to say his name. Brynjolfsson, I think, and then Andrew McAfee.
Beautiful.
And these guys are talking about what happens when computers really start to automate, like the next wave of automation, right? When it's no longer the factory floor, but it's all the white collar jobs that can be routinized, then become automated, right?
Right.
So I keep thinking, well, there's one version of the future where all those people those jobs are just lost, right? And then more profits drop down to the bottom line, and the shareholders get richer, and that's kind of more of what we have today. But the thing I keep thinking is, well, what if you have a company that does the opposite, right? And it says, okay, yeah, there are a bunch of stuff that can be turned into routines, turned into business process, and automated. Yep, that's fine. But why don't we take those people who've just been freed up and move them over to do more of the kind of stuff that you were just talking about, John, right? Which is being that point of contact with the outside world.
Right.
And how do you do that? Now, you're never going to find, a situation where there's going to be quite enough employees to do kind of one-on-one. There's always going to be more people on the outside of the company than are on the inside. So the technology is going to have to do kind of like what Hangout does, which is to help scale that one person so that it's not just a one-to-one, but a one-to-many relationship. But if we start thinking more along those lines about how the technology can actually enhance the direct relationships and build those personal connections in ways that don't knock out the humans, but just put them into different roles, I think that that's a really exciting future.
I could not agree with you more. The tension between the tech and the human is what we were supposed to be talking about, where we've really gone. But you're absolutely right. You worked for Microsoft. You did this big old corporation. I've never worked for a big old corporation. I worked for Sam Ash. That was the biggest company I've ever worked for. And in the scale of things, not all that big. You've worked for a giant. Tell me, all this sounds fine and dandy, and everything that you write in your blogs and all that intellectual discussion that goes on sounds great. What's the practicality? What is the possibility that businesses, especially the big ones, because we need them to move, what do you think the chances are of them adopting this? Or do you think they're going to have enough power to say, screw that, you know?
Right. I mean, in the end, it's going to come down to what people like you and me and, what people on the outside actually demand. Because if we don't demand that, then there's not going to be the market pressure to actually shift that. Now, every once in a while, you have exceptions, like Tony Hsieh, who runs Zappos.
Yes.
He actually decided that he wanted, that change came from him. And so every once in a while, you'll have leaders who will say, no, that's just not on principle, that's not the way I want to run this company. So I'm not going to run it that way. And actually, there's an interesting personal story about him. When I was at Microsoft, I was on the team in the servers. It was in a systems group. There was a commerce group that I was in, and that group, my boss, who is now the CEO of Microsoft, interestingly enough, Satya Nadella, we acquired a company called Link Exchange. Now that was Tony Hsieh's first company, or like one of his first companies. And he sold it to Microsoft for some, I can't remember what it was, $450 million or something like that. But what was so interesting is I went down, and I was part of that crew that went down to kind of help with the integration because they were in the Bay Area. And what I found was, oh my God, these people have no interest at all. They basically just were in it to make a quick buck. Now, not Tony Hsieh, but a lot of the people he had hired. And it was a miserable experience. I thought, oh my God, these people just don't care about the mission of their work or anything. And like even comparing it to some of the folks that I met in Microsoft who were like the most deadbeat of the people that I'd worked with, like they still were like lower, they were still more deadbeat. I thought, wow, this is horrible. And so it was interesting when years later I was reading Delivering Happiness, which is Tony Hsieh's book about what he did at Zappos. And he said, I thought this was so interesting, that Zappos was really the antidote to his experience with Link Exchange. Link Exchange was so depressing for him, that experience of kind of putting people were really in it for the money. They were, it was just, they were in it to like try to get a quick turn on their time there and make a lot of money on the Microsoft acquisition. And so he said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to build a company that is really oriented around people and around, eventually he came to the point where he realized it was around happiness. That's what he was trying to optimize, was happiness.
Nice.
Which is a radical idea. It really is a radical idea. So, the interesting thing about that is that who acquired Zappos? Amazon.
Right. And you were the one who pointed out in the conversation, Alex, I don't know if you just read that earlier, but you were the one who pointed out in the conversation that Amazon has let Zappos run like no control, right? They're just like, do your thing. Right?
Yeah.
Which is that unusual for corporations to work that way?
My guess is that they are trying to study Zappos, because if you look at Amazon, they're almost a kind of a study in opposites. It's highly automated.
Interesting.
Zappos, one of the things I thought was so interesting is when they use the technology to build connections. So there's a great little vignette. I was down in San Francisco and heard Tony Hsieh speaking at this conference called Wisdom 2.0, and he said that when people logged in to work in the morning, they'd type in their password, but then the other thing they had to do was there would be a random face from somebody inside the company would pop up, and they had to type in their name.
How cool is that?
Right? Just as a way to make sure that social connection was being woke there. I thought, wow.
That is great. I want to start this suggestion, and then I want Alex to take it somewhere.
Oh, great!
And then I want Well,
challenge.
I want to ask this question to both of you. I want Alex to give us her perspective from how she sees things, and then I'd like your perspective on this. Okay. It seems to me that we are seeing a renaissance in the idea of the business model. Right? Older methods that relied on keeping the information to yourself, right, are not as successful these days or not as sustainable as openness. Right? I had a brilliant guy I just did this presentation at the Rose City Romance Writers Saturday, and I did an hour and a half of me blah, 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 because I happen to be a long-winded guy. And no comments, Alex. And hour and a half into this with questions and answers, and I had a whole bunch of writers, mostly 50 plus, with very confused looks on their face. And this guy said, look, people, I'll explain it in one shot. Our generation, we grew up keeping everything to ourselves. Private was private. You don't tell anybody anything. You don't share anything. He goes, our kids, they share it all. Whatever it is. What they ate, what they crapped, doesn't matter. They share it all because that's what they've grown up with. He goes, businesses are changing that way. We have to change that way. That's all this guy's saying. So he summed me up in like less than 5 minutes. Alex, do you see this change happening? Yes or no? And I'm pointing to companies like Google, and in contrast, no offense, Gideon, Microsoft. So, Alex and then Gideon, I'd like to know what you guys think on this.
It's really tricky to say, because you do see, especially with like my generation, we are very open. I self-disclose often in my class because I find that it builds a much better connection with my students. But then you have things like Snapchat, where we self-disclose, but we don't want a record of it. And Snapchat is huge with my students. They love that. They love it more than Twitter. They love it. They're not fans of Facebook anymore. A lot of them don't visit Facebook that often. So it's interesting to see this, like, we want to self-disclose, but we want to be able to control it and have it within our control so that we know who we're disclosing to, and that if we disclose, it only lasts a second, and then we don't have to deal with the consequences. That could be an age thing. It might get better as they get older. But as far as the business world, I think that we are seeing openness. But then again, I have my nice plus bubble filled with people like David Amerland, so I'm like, yeah, openness is everywhere. But I do think we're going. I do think we're going in that direction, and I think the development of things like hangouts and the further development of technology is pushing us in that direction. I don't think in communication we talk a lot about technology. It's a tool. It's not, our communication isn't changing, just the tools that we use to communicate are changing and developing. So I don't think that technology is going to replace us in the business setting. It just changes the way that we communicate within businesses. So hopefully, I'm hoping for openness. That's my hope. That's my goal. Because I don't like talking to computers. They don't make sense to me. But we'll see.
All right. Good enough. Gideon?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's clear that openness is the trend. I tend to be, I mean, I'm going to focus more on the organizational side of it.
Yes, please.
I guess the term I would use would be structured openness.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is, think like APIs. Think about ways of a company, just like the software open up little holes in it so that it can put out or take in just the right amount of information, the kind of stuff that is it's going to help that entity or that piece of software do its job. I don't think so. Take the example of like a jet engine, right? That's a piece of a company. So like, you don't want Southwest Airlines, you don't want people from the random outside world coming in and mucking around with that jet engine, right? So
right.
That's kind of that's at the micro level. Having barriers around things, boundaries around things is still going to matter in this world.
Okay.
And that's true for the company. Like, you don't want people on the outside necessarily coming in and taking a look at personnel policies or personnel records or those kinds of things, right? Or some of the kind of in-depth financials, right? You just don't want that.
Right.
Or some would argue you don't want that. Some would argue maybe, yeah, that's a good thing. But let's say for sake of argument that no, there's some things that really are inside information. But that said, the world is definitely moving to more interconnected. And so companies are having to get way better at being able to open themselves in structured ways so that other players can come in and piggyback on their services, build on top of them, riff off of their services, add value on top of them. I think of it as, the company as a platform, really. Okay. So you basically are building a platform that other people can build services on top of. That to me is really, and actually, Alex, you brought up David Amerlin. I think where we're going is that kind of structured openness is going to become even easier when the semantic web and semantic search and all of that semantic stuff becomes more prevalent, because then it's not about like, here's my API, if you can understand my API, you can talk to me. It's, hey, here's what I describe as a widget, Boo, if you can understand the word widget, go for it. And that just makes things, the connectivity will explode in a good way.
Yeah. That's fantastic. So you both say everything's moving towards openness. While I am a complete, I believe in the Star Trek utopia, okay, and I believe that utopia begins with conquering the basic pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that we have a long way to go. But let's look at shining examples of companies that have maybe bounded ahead. So Google seems to be doing a really good job, in my opinion, of balancing between the corporate entity and the humans that run the humans within the business. It's not, and here's where I'm trying to go with this, Gideon, in the organization, is that having a social media manager was kind of like the first step in this business becoming open, right? It was like, fine, we'll be on the web, and fine, we'll talk to you, and we'll assign somebody to do that. And now we're seeing that negotiation of letting the human beings be themselves and how much control we give them, how much control we don't give them in what they can and cannot say. And we're negotiating this relationship as the worker and the individual and the corporation. Google seems to have taken it even farther and said, I don't just want human beings that we are going to allow to represent us on the web. I want those human beings to feel like when they're here, they have an opportunity to be themselves. They have an opportunity to express themselves. I mean, that was one of the, a healthy company basic tenet to me would be that employees feel like they can say their piece, right? But Google said, we want more than that from you. We want you at your best. So we're going to give you 20% of your time every week to just fuck off, right? And that's not what it's called. It's 20% of their time is their own time. They get to do what they want with it. They think of ideas. Gmail came about from one of these 20% times. Right? So a company that and I'm just going to say a really, really ancient statement and ask you if this is still true. And all we're doing, according to Alex, is using technology to do this communication. But a company that invests in its people has a better chance of surviving in a long run than a company that only invests in its technology. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, you're asking me? I think
yeah.
So. I mean, this is actually one of the first interactions or kind of in-depth interactions that you and I had, John, was we were talking about the deliberately developmental organization. Remember that?
Yes.
DDO?
Yes.
And this kind of gets to that point. So a deliberately developmental organization is actually a really hard thing to say, but it's a cool concept.
Yes,
so I'm just going to say DDO because I don't think my tongue can handle one more of those lacerations.
That's fine.
So the basic DDO idea is that, the way you develop people, that one of the core goals of the organization is to develop people. Work is, how we become better people. And that's not the way that many companies think about it, right? Many companies think about it, you get better so you can make me more money.
Right.
He's saying,
right.
I'm going to make more money so you can get better. Now, is that going too far? I don't know. But I did happen to, at this conference that I mentioned, the Wisdom 2.0 conference, there was a really interesting panel where the vice presidents of learning, organizational learning, from Twitter, Google, and LinkedIn were all sitting on this panel talking about the way that they invest the way they invest in employees. So it was just like, wow, it's so cool. And actually, the woman who was most impressive, really, for me in that whole conference was Karen May, who is, I believe her title is like Vice President of Learning at Google. And she was just so sharp, and she was talking about a lot of the things that were in that DDO article. And I think it comes back to, this question of routine versus generative tasks. Like the routine stuff is, you need to do it. A company needs to do it for sure. The stuff that you can just like automate, but why have people doing that, right? That's not the best use of people. Where people come in is on these things like, it's really more about the human heart. So if you think about what's in the human heart, well, creativity, compassion, empathy, inspiration, volition, all these things that are like the mystery of the human, right? The soul, whatever you want to call it. That is the part that when you invest in that kind of stuff, that's when you get the real magic, right? That's, as a company, that's where you get the real magic.
It isn't all. Wait. And Alex, let me know here. This maybe I will shut up and let you talk. Is this soft skills? Is this what we used to call soft skills? Or are we talking about a company like really like the things like having a beanbag and giving them massages and bicycles and stuff? I mean, that's to me that's investing in the heart of a human. Alex, I shut up now.
This is actually really interesting for me too, because obviously my students, the majority of them, like 10% of them are like, I'm going to college to learn. 90% of them are like, I'm here because I need a job in 4 years. And what's interesting is that at the university level, we tend to teach these things considered soft skills. We teach them how to learn. We don't, unless you're in a technical program, which is not, I'm at a 4-year university, you're not being taught the technical skills that a lot of businesses, at least in the past, have looked for. They ask for soft skills, but they also ask for very specific technical skills. So I'm interested in this conversation too, Gideon, because if businesses are, if their job announcement said, these are the skills that I require, and it said like, show me that you can learn, show me that you can create, I think that we would have so much more positivity in my students in the classroom, because right now they're just like, okay, but how am I going to get a job? Okay, but how am I going to get a job? So it's true though. It's really true. They're like, yeah, but why do I have to care? I'm just gonna be a hotel manager. I'm like, I'm teaching you communication. You don't think you can communicate as a hotel manager? It's interesting though, because communication isn't everything, and yet a lot of job applications they're just like, how well do you communicate with someone? They don't ask for specific communication skills or different things like creativity. So I hope you're right. I hope that organizations are moving to the DDOs. I really do. But my favorite part of that article that we haven't talked about is when you talked about DDOs and when the people that work for you leave. I thought that was just so interesting, the way that you kind of flipped it around.
That was beautiful. Can you summarize that for us today?
Yeah. So, so I ran this organization that it's kind of a hybrid. It was a social enterprise, right? We provided database consulting and website consulting and that kind of stuff. The people who worked for me in that organization, was called Groundwire, were we weren't paying them market rates, but they were there because they loved the work. They loved, for two reasons. One, there was meaning in the work. We were working for a sustainable society. So all the clients we had were working on that issue of sustainability. So that was one thing, is like that drive to have meaning and stuff like that. That really fulfilled a big part of why they were there. The other part of it was that I personally believed in that, that 20% rule that Google, that rule that Google has about setting aside 20% for innovation. We practiced that too. And that was a huge motivator for people because people love solving puzzles. That's a huge drive. It's part of what, not everybody, but there are a lot of people who, when you give them that challenge of, being able to use their creativity, it's just a huge draw. The other thing that I try to do, and so this gets to your question, Alex, was that part of that ability to learn and was also about helping them to explore their own leadership, right? And so I believed in, and I still believe in, helping people in the organization to step out into the community, whatever their area of expertise is, and go out and talk, right? Go out and build those relationships, because those relationships then get pulled back into the organization over time. And it really does strengthen the organization. Now, the downside, and this is the thing that was kind of was a hidden gem, was that eventually, sometimes, especially if you're not paying well enough, those people are going to leave, right? Because of whatever, they have kids or whatever, and they have to balance those needs. And so, what was happening for us was I was kind of getting bummed out because we'd have these really great people, and then they would go and work in these other organizations. And then what I learned over time was that when those people started showing up in these other organizations, it was like having this amazing fruit. It was bearing fruit in these other organizations. These people who had this incredibly strong relationships with us were now working in these other organizations that we cared about. And so now all of a sudden we were starting to build this really tight network of organizations that happened as a result of the fact that we invested in people and we'd given them the freedom to kind of go and build those relationships in the first place. So it was so cool. It was such a nice surprise to have.
Yeah, perfect, fantastic. I've had the same experience, Gideon, and been the employee in that case as well, right? I mean, when you recognize that a company has taken the time to invest in you and to grow you, doesn't matter where you go or why you go, you remember that experience, and at least most people would take the time to recognize that. You talk about branding, talk about doing something for your bottom line long term, right? I mean, I think that's really, if I could simplify it to a really, really, really fundamental concept. And this goes for everything I think that we're doing in the world today. We have created a society where we can get things instantly. So the concept of investment in anything has become a shortened cycle. And when we look at, and I heard this, somebody said this with our economic policy or whatever policy it was with our government, and I love this. They said, you are trying to do something with poplar trees when you should be planting olive trees, and you're expecting that growth to occur in 4 years. But olive trees take 50 years to grow and produce a yield. So stop expecting something out of a 4-year plan when it's really a long-term investment, right? I mean, that's, people live longer than 4 years or a couple of years. I mean, we are a long-term investment, whether you want to make that or not, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. Yeah.
It's
true.
This conversation has been. Sorry. Hey, everybody out there in the live viewing land. This is the kind of stuff Alex and I have been working really hard on to deliver for you guys all along. I hope that you have seen the improvement. And yeah, I'm just kind of interrupting the whole flow of the show just to say hi to everybody that way. But anyway.
Seriously, that was the whole point of that. Just be like, hey guys, we get that you still exist. Really? All right.
There's bigger reasons than that, but the truth is because I'm just had a moment where I sat back and said, shit, this has been phenomenal, and system didn't crash, and the overlays look great. Thank you, Todd. And I'm seeing these chats down here going on and stuff. This conversation has been fantastic. We're going to wrap it up here in 5 minutes. I wanted to toss one small question at you, Gideon, and see if we couldn't just touch it a bit, because you know that I am a big Kool-Aid drinker when it comes to Google.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I even though Todd has helped me see some of the teeth that the mouse has in that regard, I really believe in what they're doing. I believe in what they're doing globally. I believe in Google's simple little motto: "Don't do evil." I actually believe that they believe that. So I used to say that I didn't believe in anything because, I'm about empirical evidence and, I'm not a religious person. But the truth is, I believe in Google's mission. Am I a naive moron? Are they really just another big, giant conglomerate corporation that's really, in the end, going to take over the world? They've just done the best snow job ever? Or do you see good things in that, too?
Well, I cannot answer whether or not you're a naive moron.
That's fine. Appreciate that.
I'm just
I'll let
getting to
Alex
know you.
tackle that.
Oh my god, that was like I'm gonna take that out of this and make it viral.
But no, seriously, I think it's a really good question. I mean, I asked that question to myself, John, because, obviously we're all spending a ton of time on Google platforms, and, I'm spending a ton of time on Google Plus, and I'm, through that, I'm helping to build Google Plus. I mean, in my own little minuscule way, but so I look at the company and I think, generally speaking, they do seem to walk the walk. They have a mission. Over the years, I've watched Facebook's mission, and oh my God, I actually for a while was tracking it. It was changing all the time. I don't know what the original one. It must have been like, how do you get girls? It was probably the first mission. How do I find beautiful looking girls or something like that? To, some gobbledygook, and then, every time I would come back, it would change a little bit. But the Google mission is really clear, organizing the world's information. And my interactions with people who work at Google on Google Plus, when I'm talking to them, they seem to, have a pretty genuine connection to that. I will share with you something that happened when I was down at that Wisdom 2.0 conference just a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
Right in the middle of this thing that we had, there were a few Google employees, including Karen May and some other folks, who were going to get up on stage and talk about their experience with bringing kind of wisdom practice into Google. Talk about cool. But right in the middle of it, a protest, 4 protesters got up and were protesting about the bus service. Anyway, it's a long story, but
oh wow, I remember you. Yeah, you mentioned about the bus service,
and,
right?
Here's the interesting thing about it. Yeah, there's unintentional fallout that is happening as a result of Google being in San Francisco. So that happens all the time. Not everything is beautiful, and sometimes stuff like that happens. But as a follow-up note, I noticed that Google is now talking with the city council in San Francisco about how to make that better, and they're giving grants to fund alternative forms of transportation for kids and stuff like that. And I thought, okay, here's a company who's seeing a problem, and then they turned around and they jumped on it and tried to fix the problem. And I thought, okay, that's actually the sign of a company, and they're doing it quietly. I didn't see a bunch of announcements. They're just, that to me was a hopeful sign.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't even know they had responded. The thing is, I wouldn't expect anything less of them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way they are. And when you've seen it over 15 years, you realize that if it is just a PR move, then their PR department's stellar. But quite frankly, I don't think it is. I think, when a company can spend the money they spend and launch an initiative called Calico, which I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
yeah.
I have no idea what their end game would be for their company in that regard, but I certainly see it as an initiative to help humanity, right? When you talk about things like that, here, they went to San Francisco, they caused a problem. Transportation issues. What big giant corporation would care about that? To be like, well, you should be glad that we're here and bringing you all this business and attraction to your city, and screw you and your transportation. I mean, that's the answer I would have expected to receive 20 years ago, or the answer I would have expected to receive from some other giant corporation, right? So you're right. The fact that they responded immediately, they're taking action immediately. How do we make this better next time? That's, for the size of their company, that's remarkably swift reaction, right?
Yeah, it is. I think it is. And I mean, I'm more careful about making statements like, yes, they're all good. I think that there are things that Google does that, maybe, that's the thing that's so difficult about this, is that no person is perfect. I've made mistakes in my life. That's how I learn, and I think companies are no different, right? And one of the challenges is, how do we engage with companies that make mistakes? Apple, generally speaking, pretty good company, actually. They've done wonderful things in the world on a number of fronts. But when it comes to, the people who are making their products in Asia, so how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that complexity of working and engaging with a company that when they make mistakes? That's hard. That's really hard.
Well, you just hit it. You just nailed it right there. And I'm looking at Alex. I know you can see this. I'm looking at Todd's comments in here. And Google did not respond immediately. Todd is experiencing Google on a developer's relationship, and he's got a whole different line of sight on this. And that's why I find it interesting, because Google is so big, and I think people don't recognize just how stupidly giant they are, right? That you've got divisions all over the place handling things all over the place. The fact that I probably know more Google people, not know them, hang out, have a beer, but like converse in Google Plus with them, is to me the only hope I need, is that there are tons of people that represent this company that speak all the time on the web, right? They're always out there engaging, and I think for their size, they do a remarkable job attempting to address the enormity of what they have going on, right? And I think they do it better than any other company right now. Right? Apple, you nailed it with the Apple issue. I love their products. They completely pissed me off when I discovered how shitty their people were being treated. Look, I don't, when you hear about people in a Foxconn factory jumping out of the roof to commit suicide and they're putting nets around the factory, it's like, well, that doesn't make me feel good about buying my next Apple product. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Period, the end. The truth is, if I found out that Google was doing the same, I would feel this just as bad, but I would know that Google would do. I would expect Google to do something about it, and as swiftly as they possibly could. Right? It seemed to me that Apple kind of screwed around with that, and at least from my perspective. I don't know. Maybe different information around that, but that was what I saw. Yeah,
I mean. I think the bigger point that I'm trying. Yes, I think that they waited way too long. Although it was just so embedded in the way that they make stuff. They could have done something really fast. And I'm not trying to defend what they did at all. No, but, I guess the question with all of this is, when a company is doing, let's say, 80% of the stuff that they're doing is really good, and then they do, 15%, pretty good, and then 5% that's really bad. What do we do? How do we respond to that in a way that encourages the good? And it's a big dilemma. I think it's a huge dilemma.
You just, Alex, we're gonna have to talk about this in another show, because I'm gonna wrap it up here. But I love what you just said, Gideon. What if they're doing 90% great and there is that 5% terrible, right? So that makes them very human. Yeah. I mean, I hated the Citizens United ruling on a legal standpoint, but the truth is, we are actually asking for the corporations to be human, and we're asking for that to happen. We just want it to happen in a different way than they made it happen. And I don't have a problem giving them 5%. Here's your 5% fuck up allowance. I don't have a problem with that, as long as the other 90%, 95%, whatever, maybe there's middle ground. I don't have a problem with that, as long as the rest of it's good. Let's work out the 5%, right? Let's negotiate on that or figure that out. And We do the same with human beings. I don't have a problem if a corporation wants to be treated that way, but they have to be willing to expose themselves, right? To run the risk that we run as human beings when we are open and expose ourselves.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So this is, we could take this for another 3 hours, except I guarantee you people wouldn't want to watch for that much longer. Alex, I apologize. I neglected you. Oh no, you ran off somewhere. You're off dealing with the doggy. Okay, we'll let that happen. Alex has a great dog. I don't know if you're familiar with the saga of Alex's deaf and blind dog, but
No.
this poor little guy runs around constantly crazy, but can't see, can't hear, and so often she has to take him and go do things.
No. No. I saw him kind of coming into the picture there for a little while.
Yeah. So that's what's going on. Gideon, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's really fun, John. Very fun. Oh, here she is.
Yeah,
there you are, Alex.
he can only take an hour, so
I know. I ran this over, Alex. I'm really, really sorry.
it's okay. It's okay. He's just outside. It's a sunny day. It's all good.
All right. Well, I'm going to wrap it up. We didn't quite follow the format, everybody, but we got damn close. And that's all we're trying to get to at this point. We talked today about tension and technology, humans and technology. We got to know Gideon, find out about the Vital Edge, the fact that it is his brand. It's a personal brand. This was one of the points I was trying to get to with this show today. We are at a very interesting crossroads with global communication, the blending of technology and humanity, the reshaping of businesses. I don't know how many people saw that post earlier this morning by SEOWiSE about the RSA Animate. It was a reshare. The very cool video about capitalism. That set me on fire. I love what that had to say. But the bigger picture there isn't that it was a good video on capitalism. It's that message can now be broadcast to billions, and that we can educate ourselves together. We are now bridging the gaps, closing the gaps, breaking the walls, opening everything up between human and corporation and technology. And when everything finally merges and comes to some agreement, it's going to be a very, very beautiful place. You can be a part of that change. You can fight the change, but it's going to happen one way or the other. I suggest you educate yourself and become a part of it, because it's going to be a much, much better world when we can all communicate together and do it harmoniously between our technologies and our branding and our personalization. Everything that Alex said about communication is 100% right on. The ways we communicate, or communication doesn't change. Social convention around communication may change. Technology is going to change. But the way human beings communicate, that will never change. So for John, for Alex, for Gideon, I'm John. Jesus. I tried to end this smooth. I'll never end it smooth, Alex. One of these days.
You were so close. So close.
I know. I can't do it. I can't do it. This is SEOWiSE Office Hours, the Friday edition. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. I said tuning in, too. Jesus.
I don't know. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, here, I'm going to put you up, Alex. You say have a good weekend. There you go.
Have a good weekend, guys. I'll be on Plus, because that's where I live.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.